it's a sort of reference guide for educators, staff, teachers, on how to deal with kids that might identify a different gender. So kids from the queer LGBT community. But the guide, it's a very comprehensive update to that 2016 document, which is only about like 14 pages. This is about 46 pages, and it goes into detail on how to whether parents need consent, kids need consent from their parents to change their names to a different gender on their school records. So there's a part at the end of that it's a guided questions section that instructs teachers to ask their students whether they would like to hide this information from their parents, whether they would like to hide, their gender transitions. And it's funny because there's a disclaimer in that section that says, oh, we're not encouraging or telling teachers to lie to their parents necessarily, but it doesn't say that they shouldn't lie. So it's a very problematic document. It also goes into things like how to teach mathematics or science or technological studies through a gender affirming lens. So it's essentially an ideological purity test that teachers and educators are being asked to abide by without question.
Yeah, it alludes to guiding questions, which sound like grooming questions. Once you get into them a little deeper, teachers are asked to pose a number of questions to students pertaining to hiding their gender identities or transitioning from their parents or guardians. And they sort of get together with the students that they've kind of identified as being on a broader gender spectrum, I guess, to use the language of the left. And then they sort of plot together about how we're going to deal with this when it comes to your parents, ahead of the parents even knowing about any of this stuff, and make a plan with the students about whether we're going to tell your parents or not tell your parents while your children are manifesting this stuff at school.
Yes, and it all hinges, it says directly in that document that self-identification is the sole measure of a person's gender. So not their biological sex, but how they feel in that moment. So essentially, teachers are being asked to abide and respond to the whims of students depending on their mood or gender flavor of that day. I'm not sure whether this is sustainable or a good approach, considering, I was a teenager once and I was moody and changed my mind all of the time. So are we really going to, create policies and ways we educate kids based solely on this? I don't think it's such a good idea.
Now, you touched on this briefly, but students themselves can initiate changing their school records based on how students self-identify. And the school will just go along with this. And this was kind of shocking to me because my daughter can't change her address without me having to sign off on a piece of paper saying, yeah, this is where we live now. And so the students can actually change their own name and sex on their government documents or their official school records. And the only way the parents would ever know about this is if the parents access the school records on their own at some later point. So you could, be asking for your kids' marks later on down the road, and you're like, oh, who's Susie? I sent Johnny to school. Who's this little girl? And the teachers have just gone and changed it.
Yes, exactly. That's the sort of, technicalities they use to say, well, we're not hiding this. Parents can access this information, but, they won't be given that information immediately, right? So they have to go and dig for it. I wonder, if they're willing to hide something like, name changes or changes of sex on school records, what else are they willing to hide from parents?
Now, can you tell me, did they give an age range in this document? Is this for all students, just high school students? When does this apply? When does it kick in?
As far as I can tell, it applies to all OCDSB schools, and that includes elementary, secondary schools within the district. Yeah.
So these could be kids as young as 10 saying, actually, I'm not John, I'm Susie, and I'm a girl now.
Yeah, I don't think there's any age restrictions there. It's a pretty much a blanket way to deal with kids of all ages who have these sorts of gender changes.
If you'd like to get access to my show as well as other great TV style shows too, like Ezra's Nightly, Ezra Levant Show, and David Menzies' Friday night show, Rebel Roundup, just go to rebelnews.com/subscribe. That's rebelnews.com/subscribe.